The COVID WhatsApp messages, a new headache for Matt Hancock. The former Health Secretary has disputed claims made in the Telegraph that he rejected medical advice to test all people going into care homes.
I don't believe they protected the care homes like they said they was going to protect the care homes, and I do feel that we was a bit of a dumping ground.
Also this lunchtime, sniffer dogs, drones and a helicopter. The search for a missing baby in Brighton focuses on a nature reserve. The President of Greece says mainly young people were killed in last night's train crash. A station master is arrested. Dominic Raab says sorry to the Hillsborough families for compounding their pain as they wait for an official government response into a report into their experiences. And the boy who carried on camping for 3 years finally goes back to his bedroom after raising thousands for a hospice.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hossain.
Good afternoon. Matt Hancock has hit out at claims he rejected clinical advice to give COVID tests to all residents going into care homes in England. The new accusations over how the former Health Secretary and indeed the government handled the COVID crisis come after 100,000 WhatsApp messages were given to the Telegraph by a journalist who helped to write Mr. Hancock's memoir on the pandemic. The exchanges suggest he decided to only introduce testing for people being moved from hospitals to care homes instead of everyone. His spokesperson says the messages were stolen and doctored. Our political correspondent Carl Dinnan has the story.
Care homes bore the brunt of the COVID pandemic. In the early days, patients were discharged from hospital into care homes without even being tested for COVID, despite this claim from Matt Hancock.
From the start, we've worked incredibly hard to throw that protective ring around our care homes.
Today, the Daily Telegraph claimed that WhatsApp messages it has obtained show Mr. Hancock rejected advice to test everyone going into care homes. This is the key exchange. On the 14th of February 2020, Matt Hancock messages his advisor saying Chris Whitty, the Chief Medical Officer, has done an evidence review and now recommends testing of all going into care homes and segregation whilst awaiting result. This is obviously a good positive step and we must put into the document. During that day, there's a meeting about it, and later the advisor, Alan Nixon, replies, I wasn't in testing meeting, just to check. Officials are saying your steer is to remove the commitment to testing on admission to care homes from the community, but keep commitment to testing on admission to care homes from hospital. Is that right? Today, the issue was raised in Parliament.
Throughout the COVID pandemic, ministers repeatedly claimed they threw a protective ring around England's care homes and always followed the evidence and scientific advice. But WhatsApp messages from the former Health Secretary revealed in today's Telegraph suggest nothing could be further from the truth.
The importance of testing was never in doubt. But in a situation where we had the capacity to test at most a few thousand each day, tough decisions about prioritisation had to be made, decisions that were taken on the best public health advice available.
Today, a spokesman for Matt Hancock said that at the time of the WhatsApp exchange, he'd been told it was not possible to test everyone entering care homes, adding these stolen messages have been doctored to create a false story that Matt rejected clinical advice on care home testing. This is flat wrong. But care homes still feel let down.
I don't believe they protected the care homes like they said they was going to protect the care homes, and I do feel that we was a bit of a dumping ground, to be quite honest.
The COVID inquiry will begin hearing evidence in June. Carl Dinnan, ITV News, Westminster.
Let's get more on this story from our political correspondent Romilly Weeks, who's in Westminster for us this lunchtime. What's been the response to the messages themselves and how they've been published?
Well, Nina, I've just been listening to the urgent question on this in the House of Commons, and one Tory MP suggested this was just trial by media and playing party politics, but it does certainly raise uncomfortable questions for Matt Hancock about one of the most painful parts of the pandemic and how many people died in care homes after people were sent there without being tested. Liz Kendall, the Shadow Health and Social Care Minister, has just suggested that 17,678 people died in care homes in the period between Chris Whitty's advice that all those being sent there should be tested and the government actually introducing it. Matt Hancock and the government's defence is that this was a question of testing capacity, that at that period in mid-April there just weren't the tests available to test everybody, and it was a question of who should be prioritised. But that is not going to make any of those who lost loved ones in care homes during that period feel any better. And it also raises serious questions about Matt Hancock's judgment in writing a book about this period, setting out his side of the story before the COVID inquiry has barely got underway. And it makes all those families who were bereaved really feel that the COVID inquiry should get going in earnest, should be much quicker, and is the forum where all of this can be properly scrutinised.
Romilly Weeks, thank you very much. Thank you. Specialist teams are scouring parkland around a mile from where Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon were arrested as the search for their missing baby continues. Dozens of officers from the Metropolitan Police Force and a team from London Search and Rescue were seen in Wild Park Local Nature Reserve in Brighton. Sejal Karia is there. Sejal, what's the latest on the search?
Yes, 2 days since the couple were arrested and their baby is still missing, and the massive search to find the child is still underway. Search and rescue experts, as you say, have now joined hundreds of police officers to scour this part of Brighton for any sign of the child. They're using drones, helicopters, police dogs and thermal imaging cameras. Right now, though, teams are focusing their search on a nature reserve about a mile away from where I'm standing in Stanmore Villas. Officers had searched the allotments here, and a post on a Facebook page for the allotment said that officers had searched every single shed on the site and that it remained closed. This area is close to where Constance Martin and Mark Gordon were arrested without their baby on Monday night. They'd been missing for almost 8 weeks. They are still in custody and they are being questioned, but so far they are not revealing to police the gender of the baby, what happened to the child, nor where he or she is right now. And police are extremely concerned that that baby may have come to harm.
Sejal Karia, thank you. The President of Greece says the country has suffered an unimaginable tragedy after a train crash which killed mainly young people. Several carriages burst into flames when a passenger train crashed into a freight train near the city of Larissa. Some people are still missing. This lunchtime, the station master in Larissa has been arrested. John Ray has the latest.
The smouldering and twisted remains of a busy passenger train. On board, many students returning from a holiday. Journeys that ended in this horrific head-on collision in the dead of night. Some were killed as they slept. Emergency services searched the wreckage for those still trapped. From the moment of impact, survivors described 10 terrifying seconds of chaos and then frantic minutes stuck in broken and burning carriages. It was a nightmare, says this man, among scores of walking wounded. People were in a state of panic. Even though rescuers arrived quickly, we didn't know how to get out, which way to turn. 2 carriages were completely destroyed. The force of the crash between a freight train and a passenger service travelling at speed left another lying at right angles to the track. Around 350 passengers were on board. Those who escaped with their lives are now grieving for friends who did not. Dozens are in hospital, some seriously injured. The Greek president called it an unimaginable tragedy. There will be 3 days of national mourning. Police have arrested and charged with manslaughter a local station master in charge of signalling. The Prime Minister, who visited the scene of the disaster this morning, promised a thorough investigation into how 2 trains heading in opposite directions ended up on the same track with such devastating consequences. John Ray, ITV News.
Here, the Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab, has apologised to the Hillsborough families and offered to meet them after ongoing criticism of the government for failing to respond to a report on their experiences. Mr Raab said he was sorry that processes meant to support victims only serve to compound pain and suffering. It's more than 5 years since the former Bishop of Liverpool published his findings into the experience of those families. They've now been told the government's official response to it will come later this year. Our reporter Rachel Townsend is outside Hillsborough Stadium this lunchtime. Rachel, what has Mr Raab promised and what's been the reaction to that promise?
Well, the families have reacted with scepticism today. You know, we've spoken to several of them in the last couple of hours and they have shared this letter with us. As we've said before, they have little interest in apologies. Now, what Dominic Raab has promised is an independent public advocate. Essentially, that would ensure access to all kinds of support for those directly affected by disasters such as Hillsborough and Grenfell. Here's what he had to say in the House of Commons just a few moments ago.
The independent public advocate goes some way to making good on this government's long-standing promise to ensure that that pain, that suffering of the Hillsborough victims and other victims is never repeated again. I can tell the House it will be passed into law. It will be made up of a panel of experts to guide survivors and the bereaved in the aftermath of a major disaster.
Well, the former Bishop of Liverpool, who first called for government action on this on behalf of the Hillsborough families, has welcomed this government response. But he told me this morning that it falls a long way short of the finished article.
There needs to be much more detail about what the advocate will do. But I'm now urging the government to respond in full to the 25 recommendations that were there in the report that I was asked to write on learning from the Hillsborough family's experiences so that these things should never happen again.
Well, perhaps what is most significant about this, it is what is missing. There is no mention in this letter of any Hillsborough law, and that is what the families really want. That would ensure that families of disasters will get the same level of legal representation as the authorities are doing. That is what is missing. As you said, Raab has offered to meet the Hillsborough families. He has said in this letter he is very keen to hear their views.
Rachel Townsend, thank you very much. The disciplinary hearings into accusations of racism at Yorkshire Cricket Club has begun. The club was temporarily banned from hosting international matches after the former player Azim Rafiq first made the accusations 3 years ago. The ex-England and Yorkshire captain Michael Vaughan is due to give evidence. He denies the accusations, but some players have withdrawn from the hearing. Ian Woods, our reporter, is at it in central London. Ian, take us through what's happened so far.
Well, this racism scandal at Yorkshire Cricket Club has tainted not just the county and the game as the whole, but also individual reputations of some of the players. Now that dirty linen has been washed in public again at this disciplinary commission, and it's going to have major consequences for some of those involved. At the centre of it is, of course, Azim Rafiq, who is attending the hearing in London despite having moved himself and his family to Pakistan. He says to escape abuse and threats which became intolerable since he first made his accusations of racist comments by teammates 2 years ago. Also expected to attend in person is the former England captain Michael Vaughan, who denies, he said, "There are too many of you lot when addressing a group of Asian players. His role as a BBC TV radio and pundit has been put on hold while he fights the allegations. But others who've been accused of making racist comments have withdrawn from the inquiry, saying they don't believe they'll get a fair hearing. They include 3 former England players, Matthew Hoggard, Gary Ballance and Tim Brisnan. The ECB lawyer has told the hearing that by withdrawing from the proceedings, the respondents have denied themselves the opportunity to challenge Rafiq's allegations for themselves. Now, Gary Ballance and Matthew Hoggard have previously admitted using racist language, and Yorkshire Cricket Club has admitted liability to 4 charges and could ultimately be fined or docked points. 2 members of staff who were sacked by Yorkshire in the wake of the accusations later won unfair dismissal claims because due process wasn't followed and they were unable to defend themselves. Now, the chair of the Discipline Commission, Tim O'Gorman, opened by saying that it was an independent body. It will decide the case on the balance of probabilities, and it's up to the England and Wales Cricket Board to prove its case against the respondents. Now, Azim Rafiq himself began giving evidence a short time ago. It's not a court, so he wasn't asked to swear an oath before he started giving evidence, and we don't know whether he's simply going to repeat some of the allegations he's made before in Parliament, for example, or whether there are fresh bombshells to drop.
Ian Woods, thank you very much. Thank you. With a little over 2 months to go until the coronation of the King and Queen Consort, preparations are really stepping up. One is the restoration of a piece of furniture that has been the centrepiece of coronations for more than 700 years, the coronation chair. Martha Fairley took a closer look at the painstaking, delicate process.
It has survived civil and world wars, a suffragette bombing and vandalism, and is one of the most rare and precious pieces of furniture in the world. But before the coronation of the King and Queen Consort in May, this ancient oaken chair is undergoing vital conservation work to preserve and clean it.
It would have originally have painted and gilded glasswork as well, so it would have looked like a metallic object. It's decorated with punchwork, which is small tiny dots that we use to create images. So there's birds, there's figures of saints and kings. It really is an exquisite example of the quality of craftsmanship that doesn't survive anymore.
The coronation chair was commissioned by Edward I to house the Stone of Destiny, the ancient throne of Scotland's kings.
The climax of the ceremony has arrived, when the Archbishop gently sets this splendid emblem on the Queen's head.
They have been used together at every coronation of kings and queens at Westminster Abbey since. "70 years ago, a young Prince Charles watched as his mother was crowned on the coronation chair. In just over 9 weeks, he'll take his place as king before the high altar of Westminster Abbey.
Here, in front of a congregation of around 2,000 people, the King will be crowned in a service to reflect the role of the monarch today and look towards the future. But the King will be seated on a chair that has been the centrepiece of coronations for more than 700 years.
It's not always been held in such reverence. This chair is covered in graffiti left by schoolboys and visitors to the Abbey in the 18th and 19th centuries, including that of one P. Abbott, who claimed to have slept on it. Their names now ingrained on this chair, being prepared for its historic role. Martha Fairley, ITV News, Westminster Abbey.
The Prince of Wales visited the Welsh Guard today for the first time since taking over the role of Colonel of the regiment from his father. The Prince and Princess of Wales attended the St David's Day parade, where they handed out leeks, a symbol of Wales, to officers and guardsmen of the regiment. William and Kate also met families from the regiment, as well as troops from the 5th Royal Australian Regiment who were in the UK to help train the Ukrainian armed forces. And the Canadian singer Justin Bieber has officially cancelled the remaining dates of his world tour following previous health issues. The pop star has a rare disorder that paralysed half of his face. finally, this lunchtime, the teenager who is packing up his tent after a charity camping challenge that lasted 3 years. In that time, Max Woozy has raised enough money for a local hospice that he's funded 15 nurses for a whole year. He started camping out in his garden and elsewhere when he was just 10. Faye Barker on the boy in the tent going back indoors.
For nearly 3 years, Max Woozy's bedroom's been a tent in his family's garden. He and his dog Digby braving all weathers. Wow! As well as trying a bit of wild camping, pitching up at 10 Downing Street and even at London Zoo. Now aged 13, all of this began when he was just 10.
The first morning was brilliant because I was trying to plan to maybe do 2 weeks, 3 weeks in the tent. And I remember my parents finally let me in the tent after nagging on for ages because originally they didn't let me. And I remember waking up with the dog and it was just a brilliant feeling.
Max's epic camping feat was inspired by his neighbour Rick Abbott, who, before he died, gave him a tent with the message to have an adventure. Max was determined to do exactly that and has now raised £735,000 for the hospice that cared for his friend.
The money he's raised will have paid for around 15 nurses for an entire year. And that means that those 15 nurses would have an impact on the lives of around 500 local patients. And we just want to say thank you, Max, for everything you've done. We can't believe that 3 years later, here we are, it's coming to an end. But we are so grateful for everything you've done, and so are all the patients and families that we support.
After awards and accolades, Max will celebrate his last night outdoors on April the 1st as part of a special charity festival.
I think the 3 years was the right decision to come in because it's been a brilliant 3 years. I've had some brilliant experiences and I just want to thank everyone that supported me and donated to the cause. I think it's going to feel a bit weird coming back inside, but time's come to an end, sadly, and I think the next adventure is waiting for me.
After such an impressive achievement, all eyes will be on what the next adventure may be. Faye Barker, ITV News.
Won't it just? What an absolute star there. Lucrezia will be here with the evening news at 6:30 from me and everyone here for now. Bye-bye.